Welcome everybody, it's Unstoppable Steletsy here, and this will be our first Age of Empires 3 Wars of Liberty Middle East Civ overview. It's part of my series that I mentioned last week. The previous week we went over the Middle East culture itself, all the buildings, all the common units between the Persianates and the Arabs, as well as the other features. Now we're going to dip into our first actual civilization, the Persians, or the Iranians. I've seen references to both Persians and Iranians be used before in the forums and Discord and stuff by the devs, so whichever title floats your boat, I guess, will work. So what is the Persians in relation to Age of Empires 3 Wars of Liberty? In Wars of Liberty, they could be classified as sort of a resource trickle, royal court, and militaristic civilization, to say the least. So quite a few bonuses working on them between their actual bonuses as well as the stuff you get from the Madrasa. But before we even get into any of the gameplay related mechanics and stuff, we need to go over the cards that they have. If you don't want to look at the cards, you could totally skip a little bit further along, but there have been some changes to the cards of Iran, so it's better to just do a full scale overview of all the cards all over again, so you can figure out basically how they work, how you're supposed to use them, and so forth. So, since my big giant Middle East stream, I've gone to play the Persians a lot more, so I have a lot more perspectives on these cards than I did previously. So we're going to start in the Grand Bazaar. The Grand Bazaar is where you get your crates, your villagers, as well as your explorer-related upgrades mainly. So we'll go over those now. So here are your villagers, the servants. As we saw in the last week, the servant is your primary villager of a Middle East civ. Doesn't matter if you're part of the Arab sect of the Middle East civs or the Persianate one, you're going to have servants. So in general, this is going to be your primary one for Age 1 sending. The Infinite 4 one is going to be very good if you're stuck in Age 2, because it means you're going to be able to keep up with players that have additional town centers, so this is a very important card for you to have. I would suggest everybody puts this card in their deck if you think you're going to be doing a sort of prolonged Age 2 combat. And even if you're in Age 3 and you want to still send villagers in, this card can still be, not as efficient regarding the age and the value of the cards, but it can still, do something for you. If you want to send a big boy card in Age 3, you got the 8 Servants one. This is a big villager card, and it can certainly help your boom a little bit. But it is a one-time use one, though, while this one is a infinite one. So if you think you're going to get raided and you're going to lose all these, just go for the infinite one so you have a bit of an insurance policy. That being said, if you somehow make it to Age 4, which I think with the Persians is very likely because of the way they're set up, you get the Infinite 10 Servants card here, which can either help you boom really fast if you don't have all your villagers at that point, or if you lose a bunch of villagers, this is a great recovery card for you to get, so I totally suggest everyone considers putting this in their deck if they're planning on Industrial Age and later gameplay, because it'll just keep you alive longer in the event that you get raided. It'll certainly, if you don't have all the villagers at that point, it's going to make sure that you have all the villagers, and you get the idea. But moving on from the basic villager concepts, here we have the crates. You got all the food crates up to the Age 3 one of 1,000 food. Same for coin, so you do have the ability to basically put that right into your age up pretty much, since as you know, Madrasa text costs either food, gold, or a combination of the two. With the exception obviously being Afghans with their wood-based ones. But for the case of Persians, either or of these could be used to leverage towards your Madrasa texts, and obviously towards any unit-related costs you might need. Your wood, however, only goes up to the Age 2 of 700 wood, which is totally fine, since this will be very useful for you setting up your first gunsmith, your mahalas, maybe even a forge, depending on the situation, so this is very useful to you. Over here we have Okika. Okika is a food trickle, similar to Colbertism in the Legacy game. So it's a trickle of about 2.1 food. So it could certainly be useful for you to afford things like additional villager queues, maybe some of the food costing market, or Bazaar techs as they're called for the Middle East, or maybe some military. You would use it really the same way you would use Colbertism with civs that have access to it, like the French do in the Legacy game. So just keep that in mind. Nothing too special about it. But yeah, I mean, the Persians already have a lot of resource trickles, as we're going to see in a little bit. But solely this could add on to it even more. So, I mean, maybe this card is a little bit more important to the Persians, since that's sort of how their whole civ runs and operates. But at the same time, since they already get resource trickles as part of the primary civ, maybe it's less important. It's up to you to decide based on your playstyle. Here's an interesting one, though. Persian Rug. It's a team card that gives everybody on the team 2,000 coin. Yeah, yikes. Wowzers. This is a big one. And I have not done a lot of team games as the Persians before, but I can tell you, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. You know why? Because if you're doing a 4 versus 4 and you get up to the industrial age pronto through your Madrasa and the way it's set up as the Persians, you're giving the whole team basically 8,000 gold between the 3 players. That is a huge number. Especially if somebody decides, you know what, I'm going to tribute my gold to somebody else and maybe get them up to Imperial Age, maybe get them to Great Wards. That could be pretty big. I mean, this is a very valuable team-based crate card here. So definitely consider this one in your strategies for sure. This is really good stuff. Really good stuff. We do have some herdable options here too. We have the Team 4 Sheep one. So if you're with civs like the Argentines, the Chinese with their villages, any other civs that would already have a livestock pen. Some other ones might be some of the nation-state civs with their hunting lodges, or maybe the Australians with their barn for their coin sheep. This is a nice little friendly card to send them so they can get some more herdables, which is totally cool. But then you have some herdable cards that benefits you more, like you get the Infinite 7 Sheep in Nomad. This will send about 7 sheep, and it will send a Nomad accompanying them. If you don't remember what nomads are your hand infantry that your citadels will produce for free over time. That basically fattens the animals using an aura. So the Middle East does not have anything called a livestock pen. They just have these people called the nomads that tends to the sheep or the cows, whatever your animals are, and basically fattens them up. And then you can eat them, obviously, like any other herdable. You also get a later game 20 sheep one in age 3. So, if you really like herdables a whole lot, and you want to really leverage that gameplay with the nomads, which the Middle East strongly encourages you to do, these are some good herdable options worth considering. I would say this one in particular is good, because it will constantly keep feeding you. But if you just want a big lump sum of food that you can eat later, this is probably going to be the one that you want. Just saying. Right? Here we have the Salukis. As we mentioned, I believe last week, the Salukis are sort of your explorer dog that you get access to as the Middle East civs. They're not really too impressive. They're just a Middle Eastern doggo, pretty much. But the thing that really matters is with their cards, as you send Saluki cards, they actually upgrade in stats over time. So, let's just say you send this Saluki card multiple times since it's an infinite shipment. Your Salukis will end up gaining particularly a lot of damage. I mean, the HP will also go up somewhat, but the damage will go up really good. And they'll turn into almost like little mini Yulons that you could use against skirmishers and stuff. So definitely, I have not played around with this a whole lot, but I guarantee eventually we're going to find builds where people are going to use these Salukis and like upgrade them like 20 to 50 times, and then they're going to be able to actually fight cavalry and stuff. Since they are an explorer dog, they don't cost any population. They just have a build limit of about 5. You know, kind of similar to other civs that have pets that they can train as well. So maybe we'll see something with that in the future, but who knows. And then we got 6 leopards here. It actually sends about 10 leopards, so maybe they have to update that. Basically, it's just another pet unit that you can ship. A lot of the Asian civs in particular can ship some cool pet units as well as the Native Americans. It's quite useful to you. And then we have some explorer cards here. We got the Shahnameh. Shahnameh essentially improves your Sadar, your exploring combat. gives him a 3 resource trickle, and enables him to train Salukis. As I said before, the Persians are very keen on resource trickles as part of their Civ bonus. This basically just solidifies it even more. As you can see there in the effects, it gives him a trickle of about 0.35 food, 0.25 gold, and 0.21 wood. So the trickles themselves are kind of small, but if you consider how much trickles you already get from the Madrasa text, the yellow ones, as well as maybe even add this in, that's a lot of free resources coming in and a lot of permanent economy. While a lot of civs focus on improving your economy with your villagers, the Persians focus on giving you economy that lasts you the whole game, that cannot be taken away from you from raiding, rushes, and so forth. So that's one of the things that makes Persia stand out from a lot of civs, is basically once they get those acquisitions of trickles, that's permanent eco that you can't stomp out. They're going to have that throughout the game, and thus the Persians really never starve, even if their whole base is completely ravaged. As long as you got a villager to build, or you explore, you could technically always come back as the Persians. Pretty good feature. Yeah, and obviously if you're doing a Saluki base build, this card will be very essential, since this will actually allow you to train the Salukis as well, when you don't have a shipment to obviously send these things in either, so that's good. Also, we have Achaemenid excavations. Achaemenid excavations basically improves your Sadar in combat again, and increases the value he gets from treasures by 50%. So we already have some explorers in the game, as well as cards that already does this sort of thing, namely the British Museums card, or the Nation States Chieftain explorer, who basically already has that benefit again, more resources from treasures. This is a great card if you're playing a map like Lost, where you know there's 20,000 treasures on there. It's going to allow your explorer to survive longer when he's fighting treasure guardians, and then when he gets those treasures, he's going to get more food, he's going to get more wood, more gold, more XP, or even oil, because apparently there's some treasures in the game that give you oil for Great War Age, so definitely worth looking into for that if you're going on the Lost map. Now we're at the Golestan Palace. This is all our military base stuff here, and we got a lot to cover. So first cards here are the Chaliks. The Chaliks, if you didn't see last week's recording, are basically the pikemen of the Persianates. So obviously they're great against cavalry, but they're also good at sieging buildings. They're a really good backbone unit when you just have food and wood, or if you are spending all your gold on either royal court stuff or things like the muskets or so forth. This is a great way to basically rush buildings, fight off the cavalry, all that sort of stuff. The Persians in particular get a really good card to boost their Chaliks up beyond what they normally are. They get a card called Kushti Pavlevani. Kushti Pavlevani basically improves their splash attack by 2. So Chaliks, as you know, are normally just a regular pikeman, right? They have a normal hand attack with anti-cav and siege. What this card does, it actually allows them to do 2 area of effect, essentially giving Chaliks the same splash damage as a Doppelsoldier or a Samurai. That's pretty big, because now your very cheap pikemen, the Chaliks, are like little mini samurai that can take out whole groups of cavalry even in smaller numbers. Not only that, in some situations, particularly when they're swarming, they can even become a real threat to things like skirmishers and artillery, because they can reach behind the front lines and damage a ton of stuff. This makes the Chaliks a really good unit. Yeah, most definitely. Moving on, we got the Jambaz. Here are the Jambazan. The Jambaz are your musketeers. The Jambaz are a musketeer that has extra damage associated with them, so very good at dealing heavy damage to the enemy, as we'll see in the gameplay later. But right here, these are just some shipments of Jambaz that you get. You got the 6 Jambaz card here, a very basic one for Age 2 rushing. You got an H3 one of 9, and then you have the late game one of 16, right? And I should mention too, if you're really worried about cavalry in the mid to late game, you should absolutely consider getting Infinite 10 Shadik's card here, because this can be a great way to basically save your base or the front lines if you're really in need of anti-cavalry and can't afford it. Which I don't think will normally happen because the Persians are great with the resource trickles again, but if for whatever reason you think you're going to need to siege a building very quick or fight off some cavalry, I would totally consider getting this Infinite Sharik card into your home city deck, because I think this could be very useful to you. Just wanted to point that out as I was going through all the anti-cav stuff. But the Jumbas do get some related cards as well as far as upgrades is concerned. The most important one is Jangju. Jangju here takes the veteran and the guard upgrades in the Jumbazan and cuts it down to half. So their veteran upgrade would be like 100 food and 100 gold, which is pretty cheap. And then the guard one would go down to about 300 wood and 300 gold. Pretty solid. It also improves the Sadar's warlord aura on the Jumbazan, because as you know, with the Middle East, all your explorers favors a particular unit and will actually boost their stats up when he's near them, and he also can train that unit. So for the Persians, their leader, the Sadar, his preferred unit is the Jumbazan. So what this ends up doing is it makes the Jumbazan effectively even stronger stats-wise as long as the Sadar is within reach of them, right? So if you really like the Jumbazan, you just want to get the most stats out of them, this is a must-include card. But just know that if you're not good with keeping your Explorer with your army, I probably wouldn't consider it, you know. It's only good if you constantly keep your Explorer near your Jumbazan. If you're not doing that, the only good effect is basically the cheapening of the upgrades, which, you know, it's kind of iffy, you know. I mean, I certainly wouldn't get a card that just cheapens the upgrades on my military, but it's definitely the second effect, the one with the Sadar, that I'd mostly be paying attention to here. That being said, there are some more upgrades here. Westernized hit points and westernized combat. So what these do is they basically improve your Jumbazan as well as the Nizam Atli. A Nizam Atli is a Lancer cavalry that we're going to see just a little bit in this home city section here. So we'll get to that very soon. But before we get involved with the Nizam Atli, we gotta look at the Tofangchi. Or the Tofanga. Tofangchi, Tofanga. It's basically two different names that are classified to this unit. So they're described as an irregular skirmisher that's better against dragoons than muskets. So basically, this is your early game musketeer, your early game skirmisher, I should say. You know how the Europeans have like the volunteers as sort of their early game skirmisher or sort of their crossbow replacement? That's sort of what these would be. And in particular, you can use them against musketeers, and they're quite good because they have range armor, and of course they have some multipliers against muskets, but they're going to be really good in late game against dragoons. I would say for sure you're going to be sending a lot of Tofangchis in the early game to rush the enemy musketeers and maybe raid the villagers a bit. But as the game progresses and wood becomes a little bit more scarce, the only time you're really ever going to see these probably is to fight the dragoons. But they still can be a great backbone unit against muskets, just not as strong as other civ skirmishers would be at that point. Just saying. Kind of similar to the case of the Infinite 10 Shadiks. If you feel like for whatever reason you're going to need range support to fight a huge army of infantry in the mid to late game, definitely consider again the Infinite 10 Tofangshi card here. This is a very good mid-game card that will always make sure, alright, if I'm running low on range infantry and I need something right now to make sure I don't lose my position, this is a great little bit of support to make sure that you can always keep feeding in about 10 skirmish units whenever you need them. It's quite useful to you, right? but you also get a 12 Tofangchi card here as well. So if you're one of those people, not a lot of them, but if you're one of those players that likes to have a very strong starting card and then fall back onto the infinite one afterwards, what you can possibly do is you can include the 12 Tofangchi card in there first, so that's the first one that you're sending, and then you would follow up with a trickle of these 10 Tofangchis after that. Not everybody's into that type of playstyle because at the end of the day you're only adding in 2 more skirmishers, which is I think a fair way to look at it. But some people that want particularly optimized rushes with the most possible units will often include this card first and then go with this one afterwards, after the initial shock and awe of the first one. And I think that's a totally fair way to do it. So I would totally consider that if you're into that sort of play. Or if you don't want to have an infinite Tofangchi card, which if you're going to be shipping these in, I totally recommend you get this one first and not this one. You could possibly ship just this one only. But, it's a little bit sus, I think, for my playstyle anyways. But that being said, there is an important card we need to look at here for the Tofangchi. It is the Nizam-e-Bakhtiyari. The Nizam-e-Bakhtiyari is a special card that researches the veteran upgrade for the Tofangchi, the organized upgrade, an age early. So as you know, normally in Age of Empires 3, we normally upgrade our military to the veteran upgrade in Age 3, the Fortress Age of the Capital Age, right? So what this card does, it says, you know what? We're going to let you upgrade these guys in Age early, totally for free. You don't have to put in the 200 wood and gold for it. So why is this important? Well, if you're going for a Tofangchi based rush in the early game, this is an essential card for you. Very important. Essentially what it does is, it makes your Tofangchi stronger to the point of being an Age 3 early skirmisher fighting against a Age 2 early skirmisher. So literally these units are an age ahead of their adversaries. It's quite good. And if you want to put it into statistical perspective, it's essentially giving them a 20% combat card. Yeah, right. So basically, yeah, their HP will go up by 20% and their attack will go up by 20%. So, yeah, to some it might just be considered a big, beefy combat card that you get in Age 2, but for others they'll just realize that it's an upgrade you get in Age early, So, it both saves you on resources later on, and in early game it just gives you a better fighting unit, because no matter who you're rushing or attacking, these guys are going to have 20% additional stats in the damage, and they're going to have 20% stats in the HP, so this is a very, very important card. If you've seen a lot of my gameplays lately, just note that I've used this almost every time. Every time I need backbone infantry, I always send this first, and then I'll obviously upgrade the Tofangchis and start pushing them out, right? But I will warn you one thing about this card. Very important. Only include this card in your deck if you're going to use it immediately. I feel like if you're not going to use this immediately, it's rubbish. It's total rubbish. This card assumes that you're going to be doing a lot of Age 2 combat, right? If you're not going to be doing a lot of Age 2 combat and you're almost certainly going to guarantee yourself a fast fortress, I would say no to this card. Because at that point, all it's doing is saving you, the 200 wood and the 200 gold. So this tech is really in the eye of the beholder, or basically whatever your build is. If you're going for a lot of early game, this card is a must include. It's an S tier card. But if you're going fast fortress, fast industrial, it's rubbish. It's really not saving you a whole lot. I just figured I'd tell you that, so you know both sides of the story, right? But now we got another unit to look at here, the Nizam-Adli. The Nizam-Adli is a lancer that the Persians get. It's one of their unique units. The first one being the Jambaz, second one being the Nizam-Adli. The Nizam-Adli are kind of similar to the Latin American Lanceros. They have built-in multipliers against skirmish units. So that's primarily what you want to use these against, is skirmish units. Of course, you can use them against artillery too. You can use them for raiding. I've seen them be used against me a lot for raiding, so yeah, it's very fun. But yeah, they get quite a few cards here for them. This is the first one here, 5 Nizam Atli here. This is a one-time use one. But the main ones are in Age 4. You get an infinite 4. In Age 4 you get an infinite 7 Nizam Atli card, so you can constantly keep pressing on this one and spamming it if you want. And then they get a slightly stronger 8 Nizam Atli 1-use card. So kind of similar to the case of the Tofangshi. If you're going for a fast industrial and you want to send the stronger card first, definitely include this one and then follow it up with this one. If you don't care so much about that, just include this one, right? I would say the Nizam Atli are definitely a strong unit for the Persians, and it definitely supplements it well when you can ship these in. From what I've understood, the Persians play really good out of their gunsmith to start the game with. So I would totally understand if you included Nizam Atli shipments, because a lot of your primary play is going to be just out of the gunsmith, and if you want to access the Nizam Atli, which is one of the forge units, this would be a good way to integrate them into your army and perhaps be able to counter things like mass artillery and skirmisher use. Just saying. Over here we have their ultimate unit, the Quazaks. The Quazaks are a kind of a special scout unit. They have multipliers against spies, mercenaries, and villagers. So partly they're a raiding unit, and partly they're an anti-special unit. Special units obviously being things like mercenaries, spies. I would presume also native warriors and like consulate type units too, but I'd totally have to confirm with that. But yeah, if somebody's like doing immigrant or mercenary or like a sort of spam like that, this is a good way to stop that right away. And if you're not doing it for that purpose, they're great at cutting down villagers. Like if you can get these guys behind enemy lines, the vills will be gone like in a snap. They'll be gone real quick. Very quick. You also get an infinite 6 Quazaks card. So potentially, if you don't ever want to train these things because, you know, they're just a raiding unit and you don't want to put your resources into them, you could potentially include this card. And then you'd be able to ship them constantly and save all your resources for your primary military. If you love to do a lot of raiding, this is a must-include card because it's going to give you access to a unit through the home city that you're going to basically be able to pound the enemy's villages with while all your primary military is doing all of its combat stuff, right? So yeah. I wouldn't pay so much attention to the anti-mercenary property. I'd pay more attention to the anti-villager property, because this could be basically a way to win you the game if you do enough damage. Yeah, definitely. But they do get a card down here too called Iranian Gendarme, or Gendarmerie. Basically what this does is Quazaks inspire terror on enemy units and thus making them move slower. So you know the Dukkha Suffering card that the Indians get in the Legacy game, where the explorers could sort of slow down enemy units and give them like that debuff? That's what this is. So it's bad enough that this thing is a raiding unit that has like multipliers against villagers. Want to make that even worse? Let's make it so units actually move slower away from it as it's raiding them. If you got a enemy player who is trying to maybe do a mine or do a hunt, and they're trying to get away from the Quazaks, this card will ensure that they do not get away. Not that they would get away anyways, but definitely if they have an outpost nearby, this is just going to make it more likely that more vills are going to die very quickly. So, if you really love raiding with Quazaks, this is a must include, but if you don't care so much about it, I wouldn't include. It really is up to you and your playstyle. If you love raiding, the Iranian Gendarmerie card is a must, and if you're not going to be into that much raiding, it's probably something you could ignore, you know. I would say probably your primary essential military upgrade cards are going to be this one, as well as these. This one, depending on how much you like your Explorer that much, and then this one if you like raiding. Just a bit of an overview of that. Now we got a new unique unit here. The Joshin Poshin. This is probably the 4th unique unit. Actually, no, this would be the 5th one, right? Because the Tofangshi is also a unique unit, something I didn't mention before. So the Janbaz, the Tofangshi, the Nizam Adli, the Kwazak, the Joshin Potion, and even this rocket here, the Muzak. These are all Persian unique units. The Persians get access to 6 unique units. That is really big. You know, it's a lot different than most cids we see in Age of Empires 3, right? I guess one of the only exceptions to that rule would be, the Ottomans. The Ottomans get a ton of unique units, but yeah, they're sort of in line for the Ottomans for having 1 billion unique units. That's one thing you're going to notice about the Persians too. Kind of a side bonus that they have. Right, yeah. And all the Joshin potions is they're basically just an assault cavalry that has extra armor. Right, as you know in Age of Empires 3 Wars of Liberty, assault cavalry is just cavalry that specializes in fighting musketeers, as well as skirmishers and artillery on the side. If you really want to get into butchering skirms and artillery, the Nizam Adli is going to be your pick. But if there's always the risk of musketeers coming onto the field, or maybe something that might try to fight you in hand and take out your cav, Joshin Potion's going to be more equipped for that. Just saying. So probably the big boy cards are going to be the 5 Joshin Potion in Age 4, as well as these 2 in Age 3. So I would totally say if you really like the Joshin Potion a lot, probably include this one first, and then send this one afterwards. I would say don't even include this one, unless you really like the unit. The reason I'm saying that is the volume of units is still pretty small here, you know. This at least gives you up to 4 units, so this is pretty substantial. But after the fact, the big risk I think you run into when you have an infinite card that delivers this few units is, what happens if somebody's in your base with dragoons and they just snipe these things instantly? There's an entire shipment gone off the face of the earth within seconds. I'd feel much better about having 10 Tofangshi or 10 Shadiks, because at least there's some numbers, there's more units, they're less likely to all die together, you know what I mean? That's at least my opinion on it. Alright, so now we're going to go into the Ghulams. The Ghulams are one of the common units for the Persianates. The first one being the Chadik here. The Chadik being the common unit pikeman of the Persianates. And then the Ghulam being the common dragoon. And they kind of work like any other dragoon, They're really good against assault, they're good against artillery. In hand they can fight scout units. So basically your everyday dragoon pretty much. And they do get some related upgrade cards too that you're going to see right here. So the first one will be bodyguard hit points, and then you have bodyguard combat. So bodyguard combat and bodyguard hit points affects the Ghulams, but it also affects the Joshin Potions. So your assault unit and your maneuver unit. Whereas these ones will affect your musketeer and your scout unit. Alright, just want to make that totally clear to you. And I'm not going to go too much into the Ghulams since they're a common unit, and just use these only if you really need a maneuver unit. For me personally, maneuver units or light cavalry are very, very much not useless, but they're very limited in use, I think, in some cases, so I really wouldn't include these in my deck. I'd rather just have a Jambazan card or a Charik card, if anything, if I had to fight cavalry. That's me personally, though. Until I do what you want to do, if you need the range cav, maybe you'll include. Now we get onto the artillery stuff here. So we got Infinite 6 Zamabiks or Zambaraks in Age 4. And then we have the stronger 8 Zamabarak card here. So just for reference, Zambaraks can be trained as early as Age 2 from the Foundry. So just the fact that you only see cards here for Age 4 does not mean that it's a late game unit. No, you could actually train these guys as early as Age 2 from your Foundry. as any Middle East civ. Not just the Persianates, but also the Arabs. Saudis can get them, Persians can get them, Afghans, Uzbeks, they can all get Zambaraks. And as we saw last week, all that the Zambarak is, it's basically just a mounted Abyss gun, that gets the cavalry and the artillery tags. So yeah, it's like a super speedy Abyss gunner almost. That's the way I would think of it. They do crush damage in general, and then they have multipliers against muskets. So really good for blasting down huge formations of infantry. Quite good. Yeah. Likewise, we have the Musak here. The Musak are a Persian unique unit that, at least for now, that only they get. And what they are, they're basically a rocket that has a lot of range on them, and then they have multipliers against buildings. So while the Midfaz or the Mudafaz and the Zambaraks here are going to be better against infantry, the Musaks are mostly going to be good for either sniping artillery or sniping buildings, because they just have a bigger base damage for doing so in range. But they can also nuke infantry too, because here's the thing. Their crush damage and splash is pretty substantial. Substantial being a rocket unit, so they can really be used for anything, you know what I mean? I've been in a ton of situations where I've seen these Musaks shred my whole line of like muskets and skirms before. So what some Persia players do is they'll completely ignore the Midfaz and they'll just make these. They'll make like 4 or 6 of these and just use them as a support unit, which you can totally do. And to that extent, I would say probably you're going to want to send this one in Age 3. And if you want a late game card, you can include this. I probably would never send this one because it's just one cannon. And again, because the card volume is pretty small of units, it wouldn't take a lot for an enemy to just have their culverins right there when they're rushing you to just snipe this thing down in one shot. That's my main concern. At least with this, you're getting 2 rockets, so if one dies, the other one can get away. And then in Age 3, Age 4, this is great because then you're getting 3 rockets, so that's quite a bit of value there. Yeah. An important reason why we're looking at the cards again today as part of this overview. Looks like they did indeed change one of the Persia cards a bit. The improve or the advance artillery. So what they ended up doing is they changed it from what it was going to be before, where it was going to improve the work rate of the foundry and let you train Gatling camels. They decided to make it more standardized with the other civs like the Europeans, and thus it's a little bit more basic. So what this card does now, Advanced Artillery will upgrade the guard upgrades on your Midfaz and your rockets, your Musaks. Your Musaks and your Midfaz are going to get their guard upgrade for free with this. And they're going to get a 10% improvement on their HP and attack. So it's basically an artillery upgrade too. If you really like your Musaks and your Midfaz, I would probably consider getting this card in your deck for the late game. Just note, if you don't plan on getting to Age 4 at all, don't include it, because it's an Age 4 card. Yeah. Literally. And there's another interesting artillery card we're going to see in a little bit here, but first we'll just look at these. These are the Midfa cards here. Infinite 2 Midfa. This one I really like, because it's basically like sending 2 falconets. Well, let me rephrase that. I believe statistically these are weaker than falconets. Thus, that's why they let you have 2 of them in the infinite card instead of just 1. But you can also send the beefier 3 Midfa card in Age 4. And then there's also an infinite 4 Midfa card. So, one thing I will say, this should probably be an Age 3 card, not an Age 4 one. You know why? Because comparing this to this is much better than that. Because not only is it an infinite card, it's literally sending you more units. So if you set this thing in Age 4, I think we'd have to give you a bit of an IQ test. Because this is literally a trap. I believe they meant to stick this up in this age, Age 3, but devs can totally confirm that. Here's the card I was talking about, though. Minor Tyranny. Royal Court strengthens nearby artillery units in combat. This is a good turtle card for you. So if you feel like you're going to get rushed a lot as the Persians, that's the only time I would probably even consider this. Yeah, it basically increases the HP and attack on your artillery when they're near the Royal Court. That being said, Royal Court is a building and has a build limit of 1. So probably you're only ever going to use this if you're like defending your base. Literally. I would be pretty shocked if somebody deleted their Royal Court and built it on the front lines of a battlefield just to use this thing. But you never know. We might have a Viper level player out there who does stuff like that. So if you want to be super duper optimal and like delete your Royal Court and stick it on the front lines, I guess this is a great card for you. Or if you want to use it defensively. Otherwise, it's one of the least important upgrade cards. Most important ones again would be probably these. If you're going cavalry. If you're just going lancers and muskets, these. And then this one. Also this one too. Yeah, this is a really good one too. Okay, so now we're on to the Sepasal Mosque, where we look at some more improvements now, and we got quite a few here. So first we're going to look at the native-related ones. So first one up here is Native Allegiances. Allows native warriors to train 30% faster. So it's a pretty good training card if you like natives, right? And then you have the Jizya, which allows you to receive about 500 gold from every native that you're allied to. So if you're needing some quick cash, this is a great way to get that quick cash. In particular, if you can get up some of your caravanserais at like 2 or 3 different native sites, you're looking at getting a nice solid 1,000 gold or more, which is quite good, quite a good thing. We also have some native combat cards here too that the Persians can get. The Dimna hit points and the Dimni combat. Dimni. I don't know what Dimni means, but yeah, that's what it is. This one has the shield, so it's a HP one, and this one has the daggers with the shield, so this is a combat one. So if you really, really love native warriors a lot, I would consider again Dimni combat and Dimni hit points to make them better. Because when it's going to end up happening, if you combine these two, your natives will be 50% stronger in HP and then have 25% more attack. So quite useful for the player to use. I have not done a lot of native-based builds with the Middle East yet, but probably if you want to do that, this is the area you want to look, is all these cards. We also get Dar al-Salam, or Dar al-Islam. Allied warriors cost less food and wood, but extra gold. As you know, most natives in the game do not cost gold, they cost food and wood. So if you're really low on food and wood, you're like, hey, I'm running out of all my food and wood doing this native build, maybe consider this card, but do note that you're going to have to cough up a bit of your gold. Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot, it's just going to be a little bit of gold. The food and wood costs could be diminished quite a bit, by about a quarter, which is okay, We also get kinship. Kinship is the same as blood brothers, right? So, if you remember correctly from the Legacy game, there were a ton of native-based build orders that used the Blood Brothers card to get your natives up in their Veteran and Guard upgrades very quickly. So you don't even have to worry about researching and spending all those resources on. That's exactly how you would want to use kinship. Same purpose. If you got a ton of natives, you're looking to use your resources elsewhere, kinship is a great way to get them quickly upgraded through Veteran and Guard very quickly. So yeah, very useful to you. Lastly, we have Advanced Caravanserai. As you know from last week's overview, the Caravanserai is a unique Middle Eastern trading post building. So you know how most of just use a regular trading post, right? Middle East uses their own called the Caravanserai. It has more hit. I believe it's slightly tankier than a TP, and then it also has the range attack, of course, it's always active. So the fact that a caravanserai already has that range attack already active on the building from the get-go means, how is advanced caravanserai supposed to work then, right? So the way advanced caravanserai ends up working is it increases the hit points of the caravanserai again, making it even more durable. And then it allows them to provide you 15 housing space too. Yeah, remember that the caravanserais, because they have that range attack already active from the start of the game, ends up becoming a more expensive trading post to use. Thus, giving you this card basically allows you to save on your mahalas. So you don't have to build as much mahalas anymore, because you can just house the units using these instead. But be very, very, very careful with this. Very careful with this. Because if you're dealing with the player who's on his feet, rushing your trading post with natives, muskets, or pikes, you could die using this card and relying on it. So be very careful. Very, very careful. Super careful. You gotta secure the trading post, and you have to make sure they don't fall. Because if you do, you're going to get housed, and you're probably going to get defeated from it. So, for the love of everything, make sure that you know your caravanserais are not going to get burned down if you try to use this as part of your build order of not building as many houses. Just telling you that now from experience. There's a lot of times in my games when I've lost trading posts like super fast. So if you're thinking of maybe using that to like supplement your houses, just be very careful and aware of that. Alright, so now we're going to look at some more cards here. We got improved buildings. What do I have to say about this? This is probably your average card for any other civ. A lot of civs get access to this card. It's particularly useful for Middle East because of the citadels, of course, and how tanky those things are. But, you know, other than that, it's just a regular building improvement. Here we have our training-related cards and so forth. First card here is the Qualat. Qualat doubles the amount of towers you can build. So, basically, I believe you can only have up to 5 towers, and this increases it up to 10. So, if you love turtling with towers as the Middle East, this is probably going to be a good card for you to do. Notice that it is the King or the Queen chess piece, but we have some other chess piece cards here too. We have the pawn here, Ansar. Ansar essentially allows all your infantry to train 40% faster. This is all infantry, native warriors, mercenaries, gunsmith units, forge units, right? And then you have the Furlusia. Furlusia, otherwise the knight chess piece, allows your cavalry to train faster. So again, this is all your natives, all your mercenaries, all of your forge ones, and all of your gunsmith ones. It's a bit of a interesting situation the way Middle East works, right? Is what ends up happening is, unless you have a specific unit in mind that you're going to be spamming, you probably want to send these later because you want to make sure that you actually have both a gunsmith and a forge active to make full use of them. So yeah, definitely something worth concern because you have the unfortunate situation where half of your cav is in the gunsmith and then the other half is in the forge. Same thing with the infantry, so you just have to be mindful of that. And then we have alchemy. Alchemy is the same as engineering school. Basically allows your artillery to train faster. That's really about it. And then over here we have some more cards too. We got Elanisas. Buildings except walls and fountains return 25 coins over 10 seconds upon construction. So when I was first testing Middle East update, I really didn't understand how this thing worked. But basically what ends up happening is basically when you build the building, right? It's going to trickle you a bit of gold while you're doing that. Remember, we're the Persians. Our civ bonus is resource trickles. So this is just another temporary resource trickle you're going to be able to take advantage of with this card. I have not used this card a whole lot. I can't tell you for sure if it's good. Maybe it is. Maybe it's something worth considering. But I would probably say maybe send this towards mid to late game when you're going to be doing a lot of construction. So that way you can get the most optimal gold out of it for things like artilleries, ambaracks, mercenaries, things of that nature. Particularly since you have a royal court option, as we're going to see in a bit, that actually benefits your mercenaries quite good. Right? Now we have the Citadels. As I've said last week, in Middle East world, you only get a maximum build limit of 2 Citadel town centers throughout the lifespan of a normal game. Right? It's because the Citadels are not normal TCs, they have extra hit points, and they have a ranged attack that they always do no matter what. So they're like almost like a little mini fort. So if you want more than 2 Citadels, you're going to have to send these cards in to actually improve their build limit. The first one being the Tabriz Citadel will increase your Citadel build limit to 3. If you also want to include Isfahan, doing Tabriz and Isfahan will get your build limit of Citadels up to 4. And just know too that these cards do send the wagon as well. So it's not just improving the build limit, it's also giving you that extra Citadel immediately too, which is good. So, yep, this is Tabriz, this is Isfahan, and this is Shiraz. So if you combine Tabriz, Isfahan, and Shiraz, all 3 of these, you can maximize your Citadel build limit to about 5. Quite good. 5 town centers. You could do a lot of booming with that. And also it's going to be super defensive since these Citadels again are shooting at enemy units all the time. So very useful for you. Now we have more emergency unit based stuff over here in defense stuff. Fedayeen. Servants improved by 65% hit points. It's the same as the Pioneers card that the Europeans get, but it's just Middle Eastern Fedayeen. And then we have Jihad. Irjali and Mushahideen no longer lose hit points over time. So, yeah, basically when you're using Minutemen, they're going to last more than a minute finally. Last more than a minute, yeah. And then you got Vista Belidia. Servant, Irjali, and Mushahideen attack, range, and line of sight increase. I haven't played a lot with these cards before, but it's totally possible that they're worth getting if you love your emergency units. I will tell you, as a bit of a prelude to today's recording, the red Madrasa ticks for Persians do indeed deliver Iljadi emergency units, so maybe this is a good synergy for that, you know, maybe it is. But we'll see. We'll see what ends up transpiring from that. We'll find out. Right, so now we got some advanced cards to look at. We got Advanced Citadel. Citadels are 30% cheaper and 30% tankier. So as you know, Citadels are pretty expensive buildings, you know. The Wars of Liberty team has recently made town centers like they are in Definitive Edition, where they only cost 500 wood. But these big Citadels, they cost about 750 wood. You know, they're expensive than even the old town centers were. And again, that's because they have more hit points and they shoot at units all the time, so they're more fortified, they're more valuable. If you want town centers that cost a little bit more like what they were before, this is the card you're going to need for that. If you want like a 600 or possibly even cheaper Citadel to build in wood cost, this is what you're going to need for that. Just telling you now. Right. And then we have Advanced Royal Court. The Royal Court is cheaper. Wait a minute, no, it's not cheaper. It has more hit points, and it makes the courtiers cheaper. Ah, yes. Alright. So, yeah, basically, if you want to utilize the Royal Court more, and with Persia, I totally recommend that you do. It's really good for them to do. Include this card, you know. That way, no matter which courtier you end up picking at the Royal Court, or I should say courtiers in the case of the Persians, you're going to be able to afford it a lot easier, because it's going to cheapen it by about 20% each. Quite good. We also have Advanced Fountain. Fountains, of course, are your late game building, as we saw last week, that will basically produce bushes for your villagers to gather either food from or gold from, right? And what this ends up doing is it makes the fountains cheaper and the bushes will spawn faster. It also enables the coin bushes an age early. So normally, if you're Persians, you're only going to have access to your apricot bushes in the early game to get food. But what this ends up doing is it says, oh no, we'll let you get your saffron ones in age 2 as well in case you're running low on gold. I think it's a pretty reasonable advanced card myself, as it's very applicable to those that are just stuck in age 2. Because obviously if you have a bunch of founds and you can't get any mines anymore, you're clearly going to need access to some sort of coin bushes to sustain yourself, and this is going to be a must-include card to make sure that you can do that. And one thing I will say about this particular card that makes him better than, say, Advanced Mill and Advanced Plantation is the fact that it affects both your late-game food and your late-game gold all in one, wrapped under one package. And guess what? Since your fountains just produce bushes that you gather from, it means you don't even have to build any additional fountains, right? So if you have a ton of food, you just need some gold in age 2, guess what? This card, once you send it, means that you can start receiving those gold bushes right away. Or at least whenever they spawn, right? Because you'll just be able to take the fountains you already got and switch them over to the gold bushes, right? To the saffron ones. So that is very useful to you, right? If you're doing any sort of naval stuff, you do have advanced stock. It basically works the same as any other advanced stock card that civs get access to, so nothing too special about that. Now, this is one of the things that plays into the whole Persians trickle-friendly mechanic thing. So not only do you get a lot of resource trickles as the Persians, but you also get blue Madrasa text that improves the trickle rate of your religious buildings, your temples, or your mosques. So there's actually a lot of cards that the Persians get around that mechanic. So the first one is Mushaf Fatima. Mushaf Fatima allows imams to trickle wood over time. So again, another resource trickle. There's so many cards we've seen with the Persians that does something with resource trickling. Whether it's the explorers trickling resources, the imams are doing it now, buildings trickling gold after being built. There's a lot of trickles going on with the Civ, and we haven't even gone into the Civ proper yet. And we're already seeing even more trickles, right? But here's a bit of a reference to that here. Sepasal Mosque. Temple build limit increase, and they now empower nearby units' attack. This is good because guess what? Now you get another experience point trickle from another mosque. Isn't that pretty good, right? Yeah, but also defensively, your troopers will do more attack when they're defending the mosque too. So this could double as both a additional trickle card and a defensive turtling card. This is quite efficient. And then we have another card here, renovation of Imam Hussein Shrine. So what this ends up doing is it gives you another mosque. So just as a recap, Persians can get up to 3 mosques or 3 temples, if you want to call them that, 3 religious structures, whereas most civs can only have just 1. So this triples your experience point trickle beyond what it normally could be with churches. As well, this also improves the trickle of the temples by 100%. So it doubles it. So basically, if you send both of these, you go from just having a standard church trickle to having 3 churches, so tripling that, and then you multiply that again by another multiplier. So it takes the normal experience trickle from churches for civs and it multiplies it by 6. Very good. And that's not even including the blue Madrasa text that the Persians get, which will improve the trickles even more. So Persians are starting to get a bit of a theme, as you see. And this isn't just an aspect of the resource trickle bonus that the Persians enjoy. It's also an aspect of their favorability of playing with the royal court building. The Persians love their royal court, as we're going to see, and this is a great way to support that, is with this. Because basically what all this does is it basically just improves that trickle by a whole lot, basically. It's quite good. Right. There's actually some cards I did not get to over here yet that I will now. This is the most important one. Most important card to ever send is Persia. This is your most important card ever to send. It's even more important than 3 villagers, in fact. I would go as far to say you don't even need 3 villagers in a Persia deck if you just use this. This is so good. You know what it is? It's called harem photography. It's some cool Persian dude with 2 women hijabis there. He's having the time of his life. If you send this card, you're going to be having the time of your life too, even though you're still single. Basically what this card does is it makes all of the yellow Madrasa checks 20% cheaper. You might be thinking, okay, so what's the big deal with that? It makes a huge deal, actually. You know why? It's the yellow Madrasa text with the Persians that gives you the resource trickles. Yeah. So what does that mean? If you send harem photography first, you could very quickly cycle through all 6 of the yellow Madrasa texts before you even hit age 3. And that's kind of the primary way that you're supposed to do Persians. If you're doing anything else with the Persians, it's going to be less than optimal, with some exceptions, right? So, yeah, this is pretty good. This is a way to set up your most optimal Persian build orders with this. Very important card. Don't forget. Cheap Gunsmith. As I said before, the Gunsmith is probably one of the most important villains for the Persians, since it's where they get their Jembaz and their Tofangchi in the early games. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to spam a ton of Gunsmiths, I would say probably consider this. I would even see if maybe Cheap Gunsmith goes hand in hand with Irani Saz, to the point that you can effectively, spam a ton of Gunsmiths and rush the opponent, and then have a ton of gold trickling in to be able to spam Junbaz out of them. So maybe there's a bit of synergy there. Mine might be even looked at yet. It's totally possible. Yeah. And one other card here too, Madrasa Technologies Research Faster from Majilis. I believe this is a card that multiple melee civs can get, but in general, if you want your Madrasa text to research faster, go with this. I would say for my purposes, it's a little bit nitpicky. I don't think I'm going to save a whole shipment for something like this. I'd rather just focus on the harem photography and just do that. I don't really care so much about the research times, but maybe, just maybe, the way you play your game, you have a very particular time that you're going to try to age up or something, and maybe you need those texts to be done pronto. That's what I would consider that then. Yeah. Now we got some Royal Court related cards here. First one is the Great Game. Courtiers send more units now, so now it adds a booster. So you get even more units from your intervention cards with the Royal Court, which is great. You get Sphere of Influence. Mission shipments arrive much faster and foreign units are stronger. So basically the Royal Court related cards will ship even faster now if you're in a bit of a pickle. And then those units will actually be statistically stronger too, which is good, what you want. Now, Persia gets a very interesting add-on too. The Guarded Domains. Now it says foreign intervention cards will also send 2 Quazaks, and Quazaks' build limits are going to be improved by 5. So remember how I said before, Quazaks are your raiding unit, right, for the Persians? So one thing you can do, if you don't necessarily want to have a ton of Quazaks with your shipments, one thing you can do is sort of like a minute thing, is actually just send this instead, Guarded Domains. So instead of shipping in a ton of Quazaks with every shipment, you'll end up just getting 2 of them. And then you can just raid with those and then have a ton of royal court units to fight on the front lines. So again, if you're someone that cares a lot more about combat and less about raiding, this is probably the route you're going to want to go with raiding, you know? Basically get a big beefy army of royal court units and then have a few extra little calves on the side that you can take to go and raid a tree line or something. So I think this is honestly the more practical one too. And not only that, it also is technically an upgrade to the Quizak because it improves the building by 5. And thus, if you did want to train them and start utilizing them to fight like natives or mercenaries or something, now you can get a bigger army of them and actually do it easier. It's quite useful to you. In fact, there is a pretty scary card here called Shahanshah, the King of Kings, as they say, that will actually turn all of your royal court units into Quizaks. This can be very, very spooky, particularly if you got a big army already in the enemy's base and you're not that far from their villagers. You can take all of your Highlanders, or Cossacks, or whatever you got, and turn them into a mega deep raiding unit that just massacres the whole village within seconds. It's quite good. But also, if you're running into a lot of mercenaries and stuff, and your regular army isn't cutting it out anymore, yeah, no, you can turn them all into these Quizaks and just cut them down very quickly, too. That's another option. So, yeah, definitely consider that. Now we're at the Madrasa. This is where all our economic stuff is here for the Persians. First card is calligraphy. Servants and wagons build buildings faster. So if you want to build your gunsmiths, your structures and everything quicker, this is probably going to be what you're going to want to do here. Likewise, we got Toyol. Fountains, livestock pens, and equivalent buildings are cheaper and build much more quickly. So for you is the Middle East and Persia. The only such relevant building is going to be the fountain. You don't have any livestock pens as Middle East, remember. You use the nomads. So this is really just a way of making fountains even cheaper, right? So if you want to have like 20, 30 fountains, I would say get this. Get this one, right? If you don't care so much about having super duper cheap fountains, I'd say no to this one. Yeah, just saying. Alright. Okay, so now we got some fishing related stuff here. We got fish market. We got whale oil. You know what these do, right? And then we get Jahazi. All this is a Middle Eastern version of schooners. So if you like the schooners card with the Europeans, you're going to like Jahazi as the Middle East. That's all I can say about that. We got some wood upgrade cards here. First one is carpentry, which also the Latin American civs get. And then you got the Entorcia, which is a one unique really only to the Middle East. It's basically as good as exotic hardwoods, improves the chop rate by 20%, which is quite solid. And now we got some cool villager related cards. We got the harem. Servants are cheaper and train faster. So if you essentially want to get your villas out quicker and for a bit cheaper, get this card, basically. Polygamy allows citadels to slowly train servants in groups of 2 instead of training villagers, which is a pretty interesting mechanic. And then by meritism, servants are cheaper. So basically if you want villagers to be even cheaper, just combine this and this. If you don't want to even spend food on villagers and you're fine with them just training for free over time, go with this card here. Just note that it's going to be in late game. So you can use this in the early game. You can't just turn every Middle East civ into the Ottomans. You can do it in the late game, but you can't do it in the early game. So for people that are super duper tired and I guess lazy and don't want to click on their vill queues that late into the game, this is the polygamy card is probably going to be a good friend of yours, you know. Or maybe even you're fighting in late game again, raided all the time. And you just want your citadels to clean up the, you know, the losses for you. You can do that too. Yeah. So now we have some mining related stuff. We got the Nishapur turquoise. This will actually ship you a turquoise mine. and villagers gather 50% from prospected turquoise. So not only does it give you a nice free mine for your base, but the villagers will mine that thing down really quickly by like 50%. 50%. Because you've seen with some other civs, they get like these cards, it gives them some extra mines around their base that they can build so they don't have to get raided as much. This can sort of do that for you, I guess. But it also allows the vills to grab up that gold super quickly. In some ways, it's like a big, beefy coin crate card, you know? Instead of having the coin there in like one snap, you can get this big, giant mine to give you far more than what those crates would, but you have to obviously wait for the vills to get done mining it, and the card does a good job of making that process a little bit quicker. Yeah. Then we have some mining-related cards down here, too. Dinar, 20% improved mining in Age 1. Nilo, 20% improved mining in Age 2. And then we have Wakuf. Villages gather faster from mines by 25%. So basically it's like Royal Mint, but it's not, because it doesn't improve all gather rates, just the mining. It's basically a Middle Eastern quirk, right? Basically they don't have like their own version of Royal Mint. They kind of have to forego that, which is a little bit sad. It makes you want to cry a little bit, but it is what it is, you know. But thankfully we have herdable stuff as the Middle East. We got dromedary ranching, so if you like to eat stinky camel meat, you can make camels from your nomads, you know. Because as I said, the nomads are your mobile livestock pen people, so not only can they fatten your herdables, but they can train them too. Normally they can only make things like goats and sheep, but this gives you access to the camels. And statistically speaking, the camels have as much food, I think, as the cows do, if not slightly modified. So if you're really big on herdable economy and you want to use those nomads auras quite a bit, I would suggest going for dromedary ranching for all the Middle East civs so you can get a beefier, meatier animal than the standard sheep, since the camels are going to feed you a lot better, usually. And to that extent, if you're going to be going for a lot of herdable economy, like a lot of it, you're going to be doing herdables throughout the game, you know, you're a high elo player that knows how to do herdable economy around the clock. I would consider this card. Aid Kurban. Aid Kurban improves your herdable gather rate by 300%. So when you send a vill or two to eat an animal, they're going to eat that very quickly. You won't even have to send multiple ones. You'll just have like one vill on like one sheep, one goat, one camel, and that thing's going to get eaten very, very quickly there. Very, very quickly. Yeah. So basically this is for those die-hard people that loves to do herdables. If you're not going to do that many herdables, you're just going to do whatever's on the map maybe. Never send this, I would say. But if you're going to be training camels, you're going to be training sheep, get this card. It's good for you. Now we got some economic cards here for food. First one being Furrier. Furrier is what you would expect, improves your rates from hunting, berries, and cherry orchards. I don't know if it affects the Middle East bushes at all. I doubt that it would, since that's considered a late game resource, but who knows, right? But if you do care about your late game food bushes with the Middle East, we do have some cards that cover that. We got date syrup, the Age 1 one, similar to food silos. Then you have sherbet in Age 2, kind of similar to sustainable agriculture. And then we have Zier pots. This one is basically a clone of refrigeration. So not only does it improve your food bushes, but it'll improve your hunting, all the other stuff too. So this one is exactly like refrigeration, whereas the Wakaf is not like Royal Mint. Yeah. We also have some special cards here too. Bastani Sonati. Fountains heal nearby units. So if you're doing a lot of military stuff or maybe getting raided and you want your units to get healed up, maybe this is an include card for you, perhaps. It's kind of a bit niche, but maybe you can make it work. We also have Paradise Gardens. Fountains generate bushes twice as fast. Now, this is one you might be able to utilize, you know. especially if you don't have a lot of wood for fountains. If you can maybe have like 1 or 2 fountains, one for food, one for gold. This is a great way to sustain with less fountains on the field. So you can essentially take all that wood you would have to chop and stick it right into your infantry, your cavalry, your other stuff. So it's quite useful for that, right? And then we have the coin bush related stuff here. Poppy tears, it's the same as rum distillery in age 1. Coffee grinder in age 2. Kind of similar to, your cigar roller card for the Europeans. 20% improvement. And then you have Suzani. Suzani is just like textile mill. Improve your coin bushes by 25% in age 3. These are pretty standard of all the millie sieves. They will get either all of these or they'll get part of them. So just figured I'd point that out. And then you have tobacco protests. Saffron bushes contain more gold. So, again, if you cannot afford a ton of fountains, right, and you need that gold, you can sort of combine the Paradise Garden so the bushes come out faster in the late game. Because this is an age 4 card, by the way. You can't get it in the early game. It's only going to help you out as you're pinned towards age 4. You can also get this. You can actually get this in the early game. So if you just have like one found doing gold bushes in age 3, and you just want to get the most out of it, consider this card so you can actually, afford that. It's quite useful to you, right? So yeah, alright, so now we're on the Caravanserai. These are the last cards we have to look at, and then we're going to get into some gameplay on the ground, looking around and looking at stats and stuff. So right here, we got the Sambuk, your light ship for the Millies. You got your Bagla, this is your heavy ship. And then you got your Boom, which is your siege ship here. We also get a card called Persepolis Purchase, gives you a battleship with some marines in it. So as you know, the battleship is one of the European heavy vessels. So basically, on top of your normal navy, you can ship this guy in, so you have another boat that you can spam in as well, which is quite useful, with some marines on board, so you can disembark them and use them to fight things like artillery and grenadiers pretty easily. Yeah. We also have some of your naval troops here, the Kalasis. These are just sailor units pretty much the same as sailors and marines. They're good against siege troopers and artillery. Nothing much more about them. And then we have Admiralty here. Increases the number of non-siege ships you can field pretty much. So basically improves your build limit of the Sambuks as well as the Baglas. Yeah. Also offshore support for more range. Naval gunners for damage. And then, of course, naval combat, too. So if you're going with a lot of navy as the Persians, in their wonderful Persian Gulf of all things, yeah, you're going to want to use these to combine with it. Also, you get some pirate-based boats, too, the Corsair Dows. The first one's the Trucial Corsairs here, and then the Trucial Fleet. So 2 and 4, quite a bit of boats. Yeah. Now we get into the fun stuff with Persia. Persia loves their unit variety quite a bit. They get a lot of stuff. They get like 6 unique units. They get a ton of royal court options, as we're going to see. And they get a ton of mercenaries, too. So, mercenaries-wise, what do they get? So, before we get into mercenaries, we got to look at their native unit, the Alevi. The Alevi Quizelbash, which are essentially a cav unit you can get. So, you can get 5 in age 2, get about 8 in age 3, or you can go for the beefy infinite shipment of 10 in age 4. So if you love your native warriors quite a bit, here's a nice native warrior to add to your stack. And then obviously if you want to combine in your Dimna hit points and Dimna combat to make them stronger, totally do that too, depending on what the map is. So that's cool. Now we get into the fun stuff with the mercenaries. So the first card here is Muhammala Emirate Guard. Shifts about 6 Ilaki Budos and enables them to be trained at the Hookah Lounge. So unlike a lot of other Middle East civs, the Persians actually get a few mercenary cards that will actually let you train them at their hookah, which is your mercenary building, which is quite good. So this is one that gives you access to the Budos. And then you have a card here that gets Mashadi, Shamkali, Mashadi, Shamkalchis. These are, I think, a skirmisher you can get. And then you got the Velki Aluzis here. And then you have this combined one that gives you both the Mashadi Shamkalchis here, as well as the Makli Alusis as well. Quite good. The Kolansani mercenary army. And then we got more stuff here. The Azeri Divzars. See, this one will give you about 4. This is actually an infinite shipment of Divzars if you like them. But if you don't want to worry about an infinite shipment, you'd rather just train them. You do get an option here of the Karapk Kane Guard, which will actually allow you to train the Azeri Divzars from your new hookah directly too. So, yeah, basically Persians can end up with 2 extra mercenaries at their disposal if you want to combine both the Karabakh Kane Guard as well as the Muhammara Emirate Guard, which is quite good. But then we have even more mercenaries. We got the Chechen Abliks and the Avar Maharuls here. And then you can combine them with the Dagestani mercenary army here. A combination of Chechen Abliks and Avar Maharuls. And then we have another mercenary card too. The Kurdi Zelatias. So yet another mercenary. So quite a few mercenary cards the Persians get. If you love to do mercenary decks for the King of the Hill mode, Persia's a good contender for you. I think we're going to see a lot of Persians plays in King of the Hill playing around these mercenary decks. Yeah, first they send out mercenaries, and then they like combine it in with Royal Court stuff. Yeah, I think Persians are in good standing for King of the Hill play. So now we get into the fun stuff with the Royal Court. So Persia's a very special civ when it comes to the Royal Court. It's because they get up to 6 options with the Royal Court instead of just 3. So in addition to their domestic Royal Court, courtiers that affect some of their military cards, you get up to 5 foreign ones instead of just 2. And you get a wide variety. So you get these ones here, Cossacks with the Russians. The British will give you Highlanders. The French will give you Zouaves. The Italians will give you Basigliates. And then the Austrians will give you Hussars. So quite a lot. Basically with Russians, the first one will give you about 6 Cossacks in age 2. Followed by +2 for every Russian courtier you've chosen. So let's say you're playing as the Russians, right? You decide to put down a Royal Court and get the first Russian courtier. Now this card will basically be pushing out about 8 Cossacks for 500 gold. Pretty okay. I mean, it's a pretty decent mass because basically the shipping is covering the cost of like 5 of the Cossacks, and then the gold is picking up the other 3, I guess. I suppose. I mean, I doubt you're going to send this one much later than age 2, honestly, unless you're really scrapping for cards. But yeah. Age 3, kind of similar. This is going to be a 750 gold cost. It's going to start out with about 8 Cossacks, which is a pretty good mass on its own. But let's assume you get Royal Courtiers 1 and 2. So you get the one in age 2, and then you get the one in age 3. Now, this is going to ship in about 12 Cossacks, so a much bigger army. That's a lot of cavalry, right? And if we take it a step further to age 4, the 1,000 gold one here, it starts out with 11 Cossacks, and let's just say you get all 3 of the Royal Courtiers with the Russians. Now this is going to ship in a whopping 17 Cossacks. Pretty big, isn't it? And then obviously if you combine it with Great Game, you'll get even more units from it, probably up to 20 of them. That's a big mass of cavalry. That's a lot of stuff you can do, right? And basically, it's the same with the Brits. The Brits' numbers are just about the same with the Highlanders, so kind of the same spiel with them. You can end up getting like almost 20 Highlanders if you like combine this with the Great Game and all three of the British Royal Courtiers. French, same boat with the French. The French actually give you more units. Yeah, they give you even more units since Zouaves are a one-pop unit and sort of an assault unit. So, yeah, you can stack these pretty good here with the French, you know. Yeah, basically with the French, you can essentially end up with, I believe, like 25 Zouaves at the end of the day with this in late game. If you get all three of the French courtiers plus the Great Game, so it's only worth looking into that too for your strategy. I'll get into it in a few seconds, but let's look at the Italians. So 5 Bersaglieri first, and then you get +1. So basically, if you send this in H2 with the first Italian courtier, you're gonna get like 6 maneuver units. I would say for this one, we're probably only gonna. Here's the thing. Not every I wouldn't say very few, but not every civ gets assault units in H2. So I think we're only gonna ever see this particular one if you're fighting like Latin Americans and their muchateros, maybe Argentines with their early escoltas, maybe you're fighting Trianguladas with the Mapuche, or maybe some other early assault unit, like the Louisiana Tigers with the USA. Yeah, this one is more niche because obviously dragoons in this mod only affect assault units and artillery at range. So yeah, I'm actually Bersaglieri don't even have multipliers against artillery. So this is a very neat. I'm just warning you that this particular one here, the H2 one, is going to be very niche in cases only where, you know, muchateros and other things might show up. Just saying. Now, this one and this one, these ones are going to be more universal, right? This one gives about 8 Bersaglieri. If you have, again, you have 2 Italian courtiers, then it's going to give you 10. If you have Great Game, then you'll have 12. And then here, the late game one, this one will give you up to 13 Bersaglieri, and if you have the Great Game, then it's probably 16. Yeah, Bersaglieri is only ever going to be used when you know you're running into assault units. If you're running into a civ that doesn't have any assault units, you're probably never going to see these be run. You're mostly going to be seeing the Zouaves be run. Yeah, and likewise for the Hussars, you know, a bit similar to the Bersaglieri ones, only that their numbers are slightly smaller because obviously a Hussar is a very tanky unit that holds a lot of weight. Yeah. But what I was going to do before that I will now is I'm going to give you my perspective on which ones to actually go with. So, Zouaves, these ones you should always include. These ones I think are going to be the best Royal Court option for you to include. Followed by Bersagliers, because they will counter assault units, right? As I say before, Persians love their gunsmith. And while they can make gulams, they're most likely going to stick to Jembas and Tofangchis in the early game. So if you do run into a heavy cav pickle, just ship some of these guys in and they'll fix it, right? I think for a late game like Age 4, it's pretty okay if you want to include the Highlanders and the Austrians, just so you're diversifying your portfolio. But I would probably say for most situations, don't go with Highlanders in the early game because they're just not going to be that useful to you. Nor the Hussars, because guess what? You get the Nizam Atlis from your forge. And I would say probably for your purposes, the Nizam Atli is going to be more useful because of the anti-skirmish multipliers. So really, Austrian Hussars are more of a supplement to your Nizams. That's at least my opinion. So what I end up doing to my deck is, for Age 3, I have a Zouave, and I have a Bersaglieri as a backup against Heavy Cav, and then in Age 4, I have Highlander, Zouave, Bursa, and Hussar. All 4 of these. Yeah, I just figured I'd point that out to you, too. I mean, you can totally go for Cossacks as well, it's just, I don't know. If you want like a very swarmable scout unit that only costs 1 pop, then Cossacks is the way to go. But if you care more about durability, combat readiness, Austrian Hussars are clearly going to be a better source for you there. So, yeah, we're done with the cards now. So let's look at some gameplay mechanics in game and look at unique units and their stats. So you can make an assessment, alright? Is this the civ I really want to do? Do I really want to play the Persians, right? So let's do that right now. I'm going to drop the difficulty down to that. Make it Sesame Street level hard so we can focus on what we have to do, right? Okay. So here we go. So, what bonuses do the Persians get? They get, as a civ themselves, not including the royal court, they get about 2 primary bonuses I'd like to go over with you. The first one is, when you research a military building upgrade for a unit, it will improve that unit in the case that it allows it to train faster as well. So normally when we research Veteran, Guard, and Imperial, the way Persians work is not only is it going to improve their hit points and attack, but it's also going to allow them to train slightly faster too. So that's the first Persian bonus to look at. The second one is basically Persians, of course, get extra royal court options. As I said before, they get up to 6 options instead of just 3. That's pretty big. Not only that, you can choose 2 royal courtiers per age instead of just 1. So that's why all that mixing and matching stuff that I was talking about before really makes a difference, because Persians, at the end of the day, can have up to 6 royal courtiers throughout the course of the game, which is better than just 3. Which means it's very common for a Persian player to have multiple royal court options in their home city. In the case of most Middle East civs, I think it's fair to say that you're probably going to have only one, right? One that you really want. Whereas for me, with my deck, look, I got almost all of them. I got 2 French ones, I got 2 Italys, I have an Austrian, I have a British, because I know there's a good chance that I'm going to be mixing and matching stuff together to get the most optimal stuff out of there. So yeah, of course I'm going to do that, you know what I mean? Basically that. Alright, so now we're going to build a Madrasa right here in the Mahala, just for a bit of pop space. And then we'll just go over all of the Madrasa-based bonuses that they get, since they are pretty substantial and they do affect your gameplay quite a bit. So Madrasa's coming up right now. Just lure in everybody in this spot. Very nice. Right there. Sometimes the keyboard acts up a bit. Okay, so Red Madrasa text with Persia. They give you your Irjaliun. They're basically your Minuteman. And what they end up doing is they make your Irjaliun tankier, so they have more hit points. So they become statistically better. If you remember correctly from the home city, we saw that card before that makes it so the Irjaliun emergency units don't lose any hit points anymore. So probably you want to combine that with this if you really seriously want to use the unit. Pretty much. So yeah. Otherwise, I would say the fact that they're 5% tankier really just means that they're going to last slightly longer. Yeah, no. So if you really want to make use of these, you got to include that no longer lose hit points card from the home city to really make these red Madrasa texts really matter. The first one here is Abbas Mizra reforms. And then as we keep going, we'll see more and more text to replace it. So the second one would be Boniche system. This one improves again the emergency units by 5% again, which is quite good. So where they are right now, so right now they have 136 HP. We'll keep researching these to see really what they end up becoming at the end of the day, right? So yeah, that'll be good. I haven't really gone around to really testing these Eljari out in any build orders yet to see, alright, is it worth actually getting them with no loss of HP and include them in your army? I would suppose that maybe it is, just because
Normally what we do is we start with the yellow ones here, and then we would move to either the red or the blues, depending on what we want to afford, right? So, yeah, basically just that. Alright, and now we got more Jade here, so we have even more. So now the HP is 143, and we can keep sending this again and again. I might actually just use a cheat code here so these research a bit faster. And then we have the next one here, Zagay Iskia. Then we have Order of Aftab. Then we have Constitutional Revolution. Alright, so that's done. So at the end of the day, if we research all of the red techs, we end up with emergency troopers that have stats of 169. So, you know, not the most, but it's definitely something worth considering, you know, if you want to use these in any sort of strategy of yours, right? And of course, from your Mahala is where you muster your Jaran, and it'll spawn 2 at each one of these. So it's recommended that you have all your Mahalas built, so you get about 20 of them, combined with all these, and then just push the enemy with them, which is quite good. And they don't cost any pop space too, by the way, which is really cool. Alright, so now on to the most important ones, the yellow techs. So what the yellow techs do is they deliver you a resource crate, and then they give you a trickle for that resource as well. So Bota pattern, for instance, will give you a crate of 100 food, but it'll also give you a food trickle of about 1.05 food per second. So food for now, food for later. That's sort of the way that the yellow Madrasa techs work for the Persians. It's one of the most substantial trickle-based effects of the Persian Civ that they utilize. And if we put it in like that, now you can get even more of them. So now we got Herdable carpet, 2 wood crates, so about 200 wood, and then the trickle of wood will be about 0.63. So wood for now, wood for later. Likewise, Persian blue gives you about 300 gold worth of crates, followed by a trickle of about 0.75. So again, gold for now, gold for later. And then after that, we got Banayel technique for food crates. Now this time the trickle is going to be a lot bigger. The trickle is going to be about 2.1 food per second, which is a lot nicer. So again, a lot of food now, a lot of food for later. And then you got Mahir el Portafutur. You basically get 500 wood, and then the trickle of wood will be 1.25. So, yep, these get bigger and bigger. And then the last one is Axiya Hasharia, 600 gold, and then the gold trickle will be 1.5 per second. So, very efficient stuff right there. And at this point, your Civ is really popping with resources, right? It's like booming like crazy. I mean, because we have the speed always wins thing active. Look at how much stuff we're basically cooking in here right now. And lastly, the blue Madrasa techs. The blue Madrasa techs are going to affect your churches. So if we wanted to build a mosque somewhere and find our servants somewhere. Let me see where you are, servants. There you are. Mind you serve me and build me a mosque real quick, right in this spot. So as you can see, the standard trickle rate for a mosque is going to be about, let me just, this much. But if we keep researching blue Madrasa techs, the trickle rate goes up even more and more and more, right? And more. Okay. And they also give you free imams as well. Because remember what I explained to you last week about the Middle East culture. Madrasa techs give you an immediate effect and a long-term effect. In the case of the yellow Madrasa techs, the immediate effect was giving you those resource crates you could grab right away, and the long-term effect was the trickles of those resources. In the case of the Ojarun-based red techs from the Madrasa, the immediate effect was giving you some Ojarun to fight with, and then the long-term effect was improving them by 5% HP. In the case of the blue Madrasa techs, the immediate effect is giving you imams, and then the long-term effect, of course, would be to obviously have your temples trickle XP even faster, right? So if you keep researching all those, essentially your mosque ends up trickling XP 4 times better than it normally does. So it's like a ×4 improvement. And considering the fact that with all those cards I showed you before, we can actually have up to 3 mosques and double their XP rate alone on that. This is a lot of mathematics here and a lot of arithmetic that gets these trickles really popping in your favor. Right? So now we got 2 other things we gotta look at. We gotta look at the royal court as well as our military roster, just so we can look at some stats and prepare you for using them and how to utilize them. So this is our forge for our non-gunpowder units. The gunsmith is all our gunpowder units, and then this is the royal court. The royal court is going to be a big one to look at here because Persians get a lot of royal court options that only they have access to, so I think it's kind of important that we dive deep into this pretty much. So yeah, if you want a bit of a recap from last week, royal cortex, or royal courtiers, if you want to call them that, are kind of similar to Madrasa techs in the fact that they have an immediate effect and then they have 2 long-term effects. The first long-term effect is obviously making those cards that I showed you before with the infinite shipment, those intervention cards, deliver more units. That's one long-term effect, and then the other long-term effect is something else, another improvement. So let's go through these. So these are the domestic courtiers, the Persian ones. Abbas Mirza, Amir Kabir, and Hussein Sepasal. So the way that these guys work is their short-term effect is obviously giving you some jambazan that you can utilize. And the late game one here even gives you 3 Quizaks as well. As far as the long-term effects is concerned, what they end up doing is they improve the amount of units you get from your Quizak and your Jambazan shipments. Which, you know, I think mostly it's going to be good if you like using Quizaks. I think the fact that it adds a few more Jambazan to your cards is kind of poop, because you don't have an infinite Jambazan card to actually take advantage of personally. So, yeah. But what the Persian ones do is they actually improve the favorite unit's combat by 5%. So basically, if you love Jambazan a lot, you can end up effectively improving your Jambazan by about 15% or so. So this is a Jambazan, by the way. This is what he looks like up front. This is our Jambazan right here. In all the Jambazan is, he's basically just a musketeer that does more than damage than average. So his HP is pretty good, his armor is pretty good, but yeah, he just does a lot of good damage as a musket. So very valuable unit for you to utilize, actually. Notice how he's a little bit more expensive than the average musket. That's because his damage stats are just really nice in general. So basically, if you want to go all 3 domestic royal courtiers with the Persians, you're essentially giving them a 15% combat upgrade, which is pretty good, you know. This can certainly be the backbone of every army that you do as the Persians, so definitely put that into perspective. Put up a Mahala here too, and while we're here, let's look at the Tofangchi as well. So this is the Tofangchi right here. This is our early game skirmisher unit, and again, notice how his multipliers against the Dragoons is stronger than his multipliers against the muskets. So his musket multipliers are a mere 1.25, which it's not bad. It's the same as a crossbowman, but when you look at the Dragoon ones, it's about 1.5, which is a little bit more substantial, right? So that's quite good. So yeah, these are going to be your 2 backbone units, is the Tofangchi and the Janbaz. The Janbaz to fight Cav, and the Tofangchi to fight Dragoons and muskets. So are going to be your bread and butter, these 2 guys right here. Just saying. Let's look at some more units too. So we got the Nizam Adli here. This is your other unique unit as well. He's the Lancer. You also got your Jolshin Poshin. And then you have your Quizak. Right, and then if we build a foundry, we can also look at our Musak rocket as well. Here's our rocket. Alright, so these guys are basically all of your troops pretty much. And then, you know what I can do too? I can upgrade them as well, so we can look at the upgrades. Do that. You notice how their uniforms improve as well, which is pretty cool. Yep, they look so good looking. And notice how my units get the ability to train faster now as I upgrade them. I said that was one of the Civ bonuses of the Persians, so definitely keep that in mind. Alright, let's get the one for the jewels and potions. And we'll just upgrade these two. Yeah, so at the end of the day, this is what all these Persian units would look like in super late game. Quite good looking, right? Wait a second. Alright, there we go. Lock and load. So this is our Nizam Adli, this is our Josh and Potion, this is our Quizak, this is our Tofangchi, this is our Jambas, and this is our Musak rocket here. Really all the Persian unique stuff. So looking at the Nizam Adli, notice that in late game its hand attack is about 40, and its multiplier against skirmish is about 2. So it ends up doing a whopping 80 damage to skirmishers, which is quite good, you know. HP is about 500 or so. So it's a very tanky unit. And then the armor isn't that good. It's only about 10%. But to be honest, a lot of scout units in the game have 10% pierce armor too. So it's not the worst thing to have for your unit. And this is the Joshin Potion here. The Joshin Potion has extra hand armor. So at the root, he just looks like a normal assault unit, so he has about 770 HP and the hand attack of about 40. But what really matters with the Joshin Potion is his durability in melee. His hand armor is a whopping 50%. 50% is a huge number. You know, basically when you're sending the Joshin Potion into combat against things like pikes and muskets, he is basically how do I put this? He's basically tanking like half their damage. Literally half their damage. Because let's just say a unit is doing like 20 melee damage to the Joshin Potion. He's only receiving like 10 damage. That is very big. It like makes everything else look like shrimps compared to him. So basically if you're going to be doing a lot of melee combat with a ton of assault cavalries against like muskets and pikes, these are great for that, and they're also really good at fighting enemy cavalry too. Like if you're dealing with hussars like raiding your base and stuff and you want to like take them hand-to-hand combat, Joshin Potions have the armor necessary to do that, which is quite good, you know. It's quite substantial actually. And then this is the Quizak here. The Quizak is right in this spot. The Quizak, as I said before, is good against some special units, so it has multipliers against Vils, mercenaries, and spies. But apparently it does not have anything against Consulan units or natives. So it's a bit limited in that sense. Mainly you're going to want to use the Quizak if you're raiding, because look at these multipliers and the stats. 52 times 1.5. That's pretty serious against Vils, you know. Vils are really going to suffer to these things. A lot more than if you use the Nizam Adlis to do it. Yeah. And lastly, we have the Musak. This is your rocket. Splash is about 4, not bad. 75 crush, or 70 crush. Range is about 36. That's a really good range. It means they can hit way back in the base. And their multipliers are 2.5 against artillery and 5x against buildings. So it's basically a hybrid between a mortar and a culverin. So kind of like the Chinese hand mortars, right? Except this guy is a whopping 5 pop unit, so he's really, really tough, right? The gold cost is about the same as a cove, but the wood cost is actually a bit cheaper, so very reliable in that sense, right? Now that we're done with all sort of the domestic Persian-based stuff, let's look at some of these royal courtiers and see what they do. So these are the Russian ones here. And what the Russians do is they will improve all of your units' hit points by 5%. So if you're looking for generally better military across the board, go with some Russian courtiers, you know. The only, downside is their units, intervention-wise, are kind of a bit not as beefy as the other ones here, you know. So obviously your cards from the home city will be all Cossacks, but one thing you do get with the Russians, by the way, is you do get these canton schools for particularly their earlier courtiers. And what these do is these canton schools will actually allow you to train frontovics, so basically a slightly weaker musketeer. So I guess the one good thing about going with the Russians is on top of making all your military tankier by up to 15% if you get all 3 of them, they also give you 2 courtier units instead of just 1. You know, from the home city you can ship Cossacks, and then from the canton schools you can train frontovics. So a musket and a hand cav. That being said, your Persians, you got the Jembas. It's a masterful, really good musket unit, so I really don't think you're ever going to need frontovics for any reason. You might want to go with them, but I'm just saying the Jembas clearly outperforms the frontovics quite good. So the only time I would say maybe you would even consider frontovics is if you thought that you were going to lose troops very quickly and you need a very swarmable compensator to it, right? And just for perspective for the late game, they'll give you a fort, like an actual fort, instead of just canton schools. And that fort will also be able to train the frontovics as well. So I figured I'd just point that out to you there, right? Now we're looking at the Brits. So the British, what they give you is, they give you a trickle, so a 2.1 food trickle, which is quite good. Also an agricultural wagon, so that's not bad. Next one over here is a trickle of 1.25 wood. So the British really plays deep into your whole resource trickle bonuses the Persians. So they give you even more trickles. Even more trickles. But also economic buildings that you can use to work your villagers on. Unfortunately for you, since you're the Persians, the only thing you can build with them is fountains. So they really should just call them fountain wagons, because all you can build with them is just fountains, right? So yeah. But the big one to look at here is the last one. So what it does is it gives you a 1.5 gold trickle, right? And it gives you a factory. Not just some little eco buildings, but an actual factory. I kind of want to show you that. So here's the factory right here. It's just as good as any European factories, so you can upgrade it like you can with the European ones. But another thing worth looking at is the fact that you can actually produce British rockets from this factory too. So yeah, none are coming out because I don't have any pop space, but if we like put a Mahala down, yeah, look, rockets, actually working rockets here. The only problem is you can upgrade them to the Imperial upgrade, unfortunately, so I guess you can enjoy that, I guess. But other than that, I mean, it's literally a piece of heavy artillery that you can synergize with the rest of your army. So I would suggest for most people looking to use the Royal Court and stuff, I would totally recommend you consider going with British in Age 4 all the time. Just so you have an additional source of resources and you have that factory there, you know, to make rockets with, which I think is a pretty good effect. That's why I include that one British courtier card in my late game deck. And so when I do get to Age 4 and when I want this factory, I can absolutely tap into that, which is quite good, you know. It's nothing to scoff at. And just so you know, all the costs are going to be different depending on what the courtier is. So for Russians, it's food. British, it is gold. Actually, it varies. because this is wood. So British is a bit weird because theirs varies depending on the age. Austrians, theirs will cost wood. Italians will cost gold. And French will cost an entire shipment. So probably the most expensive one, but it's totally worth it since their unit is probably the best one. Speaking, yeah. So Austrians, what Austrians do is they give you military wagons, right? 1 here, 3 here, and then a whopping 4 here. But all they really do is they just improve your military upgrades cost by 10% cheaper. So I would say they're a bit diminished. They're not that good. They're not that strong. They're really not that strong. They're really not that tough. Yeah, no, they're not that strong at all, basically. So I would say only go with these guys if you want a bunch of quick forward-based buildings or you really like hussars. You know, that's about it with them. Now, the French are kind of interesting. So what the French do is they will give you resource crates, right? The first one, 700 food. Next one will give you 500 food and 500 gold. And the last one will give you 500 gold, 600 wood, and 500 food. So these guys actually pays back a lot of the stuff that you put into paying a shipment for, and then they give you actual resources back that you can put in your army, which I think is totally good. But another thing they do is they improve your villagers' gather rates by 5%. Now that's quite interesting. You know why? Because if we combine all three of these, essentially it's like we're adding sustainable agriculture, like we're adding a wood card, like we're adding a gold card. Yeah, it's like we're basically combining a bunch of eco cards all at the same time, you know? Like a slightly stronger eco theory that's 15% instead of just 10. So, yeah, it definitely pays back in the long term to go with the French. But on top of that, of course, their unit, this wave, masterful unit. You know, it's an assault unit on foot, so it has like hand armor, but it also has range multipliers against all infantry, which is quite nice, you know? Yeah, and then there's the last one to look at, the Italians. So what the Italians do is, for their short-term effect, they give you mafiosos, the mafiosi. So this is only going to be good if you're like fighting mercenaries and natives and stuff, because that's what the mafiosi are best at. Unfortunately, there is no way, at least for right now, for you to get like a safe house and research all their mafia stuff. If they let us do that, I think I would probably be more inclined for the Italians right now. I would say probably the best choices for Persia are French and British. If you want like massable stuff, maybe Russians. This is like like number 1, number 2, maybe number 3, tied with Italy, and then 4, and then, yeah, whatever. It's really up to you. So what the Italians do is they will actually cheapen the cost of outlaws and mercenaries by 10%. So if you combine all of these, you essentially have mercenaries that are 30% cheaper, as well as outlaws. So if you love playing mercenaries, and of course, as we said before, the Persians can up their mercenary numbers by 2 at the hookah lounge. This is a good synergy for that, and you can totally make good use of it, pretty much, yeah. So yeah, it's quite a lot of stuff there, for sure, you know. Absolutely. I mean, I could just show you for perspective reason what it's like to combine a bunch of royal court units together. So yeah, if we go over here... I thought I switched that. What are you doing? What are you doing, Willis? Let me see which one I want to get. Oh yeah, I love these guys. These are good. I don't know. We'll do that. Okay, so this. Alright, so these are the Basilicataries. These are your maneuver units. These are your waves, your assault units. You can send the muskets in too. Now I'll ship some hussars in next, right? Yep. Alright, so we'll just do a quick attack just to show you if you're like building a huge Persian army with a combination of unique units and foreign units, how they typically operate. Like an offensive push. So yeah, fighting Uruguay here, and we'll just go for a quick attack on them and make them suffer. Get them all rounded up, and yeah, let's go for a push real quick. Super duper fast. Yeah, so in general, like, we can look at it while we're moving. Essentially, with the Jambazan, their biggest asset's going to be like their late game sort of stats, pretty much. And that's mainly how you're going to want to use them, usually, yeah. Typically. Just making sure we have all our army moving forward. Yep. So Jambas in the late game without any sort of upgrade cards will look like this. 50 range attack, 266 HP, which is quite good. And then once we add sort of this in, it ramps up pretty quickly to about 59 or so, or 53 once we get around our royal, I think it goes up to around 59 if we're near our explorer, so that's a pretty big jump, you know. And then obviously if we include that Citadel booster thing, they'll go up to like 60 or so range attack, and yeah. And then if we go with any courtiers from Persia, then they get even stronger. So yeah, Jambas can be a very good backbone unit that just does really good work if you want to put the investment into them, usually. Yeah, and so this is the base up here that we're going to be going after. So let's go for that real quick. Yeah, you're not Swedish, you're Uruguayan. Right through all this stuff, yep, very good. Yeah, combining lots of foreign units can be a very powerful option for you, as you can see right here, yeah. So now the AI doesn't know what to do, and he's just going to get pushed back out of his base, which is good. So now we got a... And by the way, for Highlanders, if you didn't know, basically they discharge a shot and then they go into melee with their bayonets, and this is why you sort of seeing them going into like a... like sort of like a charge like that. That's why they do that. It's not for nothing, really, you know. Put the rockets on that. Yep, and as you can see, the AI really doesn't know how to handle a big swarm like this, so he will end up dying eventually from all that. Very good. Nice. Dark agents with all this stuff, very good. Hey, I even brought Bill to steal all of his crates, even better. And then we obviously just keep pushing the advantage here to take him out. It's nice. Funny, our Kozak is still alive. Super hilarious. We could even add some Chariks in too, with all their stuff. Their splash attack Chariks. Got this here. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're playing a real match as the Persians, it looks a lot different than this. You're normally going to go yellow text right away, into a combination of waves with gunsmith units and possibly even forge units, and that's normally how you play Persians. You definitely wouldn't do this craziness. I just wanted to show how substantial it is when we leverage all of Persia's foreign units together, except the Cossacks, since the Cossacks are kind of bland, particularly because just about 3 out of the 4 Middle Easts right now has Russians, so I really didn't care too much for adding them. But yeah, you can totally add them if you want. It's up to you. Yep, and that should be it for this AI, right? Don't think he has any more ways of fighting us, right? I don't think so. Just do a bit of scouting here. If not, we'll just resign super quick. Here he is. Wonderful AI up there trying to hide or whatever. We'll just run up there quickly and finish them off. Should be all set to go, yeah. Alright. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little presentation here of the Persian or Iranian civilization. I kind of wanted to go with the Persians first because I feel like they play, you know, the most standard. You know, they got the most standardish gameplay, I would say. You know, there's nothing too fancy schmancy about their bonuses. You go into some of these other Middle East civs and they got some pretty wacky bonuses going on. So in the next overview, we'll probably do Uzbeks or Afghans. I would think we could do Saudis. I'll decide which one to do, but just know that there's a lot of good stuff to look forward to. Yeah. So all right, sign off now from this one. See you on the next one. GG and well played.